So tell me, have you ever found yourself fumbling through a performance appraisal? You're providing feedback, well-intentioned feedback, and your employee has no idea what you're talking about. Or perhaps you've been on the receiving end of one of these painful performance appraisals. If you've been in either seat, it's likely that you've succumbed to recency bias. And we're talking all about that today and the perfect antidote: feedback in the moment. Because not only does it increase employee engagement, it frees your performance appraisal from the awkwardness of that last year soliloquy. Let's get started, shall we? Well, hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the Project Joyful podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Tutty, your medical herbalist and high performance coach. So, hey, Project Joyful isn't just about being happy. It's about consciously creating a life you love. It's about remembering how to reconnect with your soul-centered joy. You know, that joy that comes from doing what you love, from living on purpose, and from being in a life that allows you to experience deep joy moment by moment. So hey, let's get started, shall we? Have you ever been in an annual performance appraisal where the feedback you're receiving makes absolutely no sense at all? Or perhaps you're giving your team members some well-intentioned feedback in the review and they're staring at you blankly. They're looking confused or even outraged. What went wrong? One of the top 3 reasons why the annual review goes horribly wrong is to do with how frequently we're giving feedback. It's also to do with the context we're giving the feedback in and our inherent recency bias. If you're in an environment where feedback is part of the dreaded annual review, it's likely the feedback will relate to what you've noticed in the last couple of weeks. This is recency bias. Or if you've diligently saved up your feedback for that annual review, chances are you'll be providing feedback on something that they may not even remember. If your goal as a manager is to set the minimum standard and to hold your team accountable to that standard, how do they know when they're on point? It's like steering a ship. There you are in the wheelhouse. You know where the ship needs to go. Now, outside influences might try to interfere. You know, that northwesterly wind that changes direction or a change in the current. There could also be internal influences that might be causing a slight change in direction or even a distraction to the team. The weight balance or a part of the engine is choosing to run a little different. What happens if you choose not to course correct in that moment? You could end up way off course. It costs extra resources to get back on track, or if you notice too late, you may end up in a completely different port. Instead, because you're vigilant, you turn that wheel. Now, nothing much happens at first, and then little by little, you start to get back on course. What happens if we don't provide feedback to our team in the moment? Well, they keep doing what they're doing because they don't know what they don't know. And then along comes the annual review, and they're sideswiped by something they were completely unaware of. If that was you, how might you react? Or how have you seen your team react if they've experienced that? But it's even more pervasive when the feedback is positive. Research shows that positive feedback that we trust, gives us a dopamine hit. And we love dopamine. That's why scrolling through social media can be so addictive. Dopamine bursts not only help us to feel good, it increases our focus and our motivation as we find more ways to get more dopamine-inducing things. So if you want your team to be more productive, more motivated or engaged, provide regular, authentic, positive feedback. Now, authentic matters in so many ways, but in relation to feedback, it needs to be specific and it needs to be heartfelt. And you'll need to find that Goldilocks cadence providing that feedback not too often, but not too infrequent either. Another reason why regular ongoing feedback is so important is that the feedback becomes contextual. Feedback provided in the performance appraisal can feel like a really big deal, even if you don't mean it to be. For example, how would you feel if you received feedback on a way that you'd presented some numbers in a report, and you received that at the time that the report was being reviewed versus months later in your performance review? You see, even if the feedback is as benign as put the word on a new line, it feels like a much bigger deal in the performance review. In the moment, feedback also opens up that space for a conversation. It feels more like a mutual collaboration amongst the team. And these sorts of conversations empower your team. And they make it easier for them to take ownership of the topic of conversation. And it has the added benefit of allowing you to course correct in real time, so that it's a minor adjustment instead of a wholesale Herculean effort. So when giving feedback, ensure that you're really clear on the outcome that you're after. What would you like to be different, or what fabulous behaviour would you like to affirm? How can you communicate the desired outcome in a way that will be easily received by that person? Be really specific in your feedback and make sure you're focusing on behaviours over identity. Is there a team behaviour you're wanting to see more of? Actively look for it in your team and praise it in public. A Gallup survey found that there was greater staff engagement when managers focused on a team member's strengths as opposed to their weaknesses. So find ways to communicate that you've noticed those strengths. And again, be really specific. And just ask yourself, are there any strengths that you're taking for granted? Now, it may seem a little unspontaneous, but I recommend keeping a tally of your feedback in the moment, because this ensures that your feedback is spread evenly across the team and that it's a regular occurrence. Get to know how each member of your team likes to receive their positive feedback. Would they prefer a quiet, "I like what you did there"? Or would they prefer a celebratory cake with fireworks and streamers? Constructive suggestions for improvement, of course, should always be given in private. Providing feedback in the moment takes the awkwardness out of the annual review. There's no surprises, and it frees up time to discuss the forward-thinking, aspirational stuff that work and personal goals are made of. It provides clarity, and clarity breeds certainty. As a result, your team knows the standard and they know how they're measuring up to that standard. Engaged employees matter. Surveys show that engaged employees are 17% more productive. They have a 41% reduction in absenteeism, and employee turnover is 24% less than in organisations where an employee engagement is less. And, most importantly, it's what high-performing employers want a caring manager to do. Sending you lots of love. Bye for now. Hey, thanks for listening to today's podcast. Can I ask you a favour? If our conversation spoke to you today, could you please take a moment to leave a 5-star review? Your review will help people discover this podcast, and together we can create a world where there's even more love and more laughter. And if you want to hear more from the Project Joyful podcast, just click the subscribe button. Bye for now.